Welcome, everyone. I think I see a few new faces, and I know we've got some folks on our stream here that may not have been in our first session. So just quick introductions. My name is Joe Tarter. I'm the Interim Director for Application Infrastructure Services within DoIT. I'm sort of the on-the-ground sponsor of this project. Ultimately, though, this effort will report up to Lois Brooks, our CIO. So this is the second of our open house info sessions around our 3-week interoperability discovery sprint. This is the last of our 3 weeks, but I just want to mention to people that everything you see here today is still in draft. There's a lot that's gone into where we are today, but there's still a lot more to come. So we appreciate everyone's feedback. We're going to continue to look for more contributions from folks as we go forward with an effort to try to be as transparent as we can. Just want to mention, hoping to keep everyone engaged as much as we can. We appreciate your enthusiasm and continued support. And just a little heads up about what's next. We're actually going to be meeting and sharing a lot of this information. Unfortunately, Lois wasn't able to be here with us today, but we'll be meeting with her next Friday, and hopefully we'll be able to share at that point what our next steps will be. So I think with that, I'm turning it over to Phyllis.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right, welcome. I just want to touch base a little bit on kind of the long-term goal that has been guiding our effort as we've gone through these past 3 weeks. The high-level goal that we set for ourselves and for this effort is to enable and empower the work of campus. And to do that, we want to establish interoperability infrastructure, services, and practices. So I just want to define just a smidge here what we mean by the work. It was easier than saying a long, comma-separated list of all the things that are, in fact, the work of campus. But these are things like teaching, learning, research, and outreach. That's what this technology is for. It's here to support and enable that work. So this has been sort of our guiding North Star as we've gone throughout this process. Very briefly, just want to share a little bit about kind of an agenda of what we'll be covering this morning. We're already in kind of the welcome and setting the stage part of the process here. And then from 9 to 9:30, we're going to kind of talk about some things that are behind the scenes. And we're using some language here that we're going to define in just a moment, but we're using kind of a theater metaphor here. So we're going to start with the stuff that's really kind of maybe invisible and behind the scenes, but really important, work our way through to the backstage, and then ultimately to the front stage at the end. We'll have a summary and Q&A time at sort of at the very end of this, and then we're going to try to have some Q&A and conversation as we go throughout as well. We are going to cover a lot. We're going to try not to talk at you too much, but if at any point you're like, I don't know what's happening, or I have a question, please feel free to ask it. So, and that goes for the folks online as well, and we'll get to that in just a moment. So I want to talk a little bit about this metaphor that we've been using. So not surprisingly, probably, once we started digging in and diving into interoperability over the course of the past 3 weeks, it got really complicated. We were talking about all sorts of different things at all different levels. We were talking about, some of us thought interoperability is about user experience. Okay, maybe no one thought that except for me, but that's an important thing for me and for some other folks on the team, is how do we make this work well for people on campus? Some folks thought interoperability is all about the technology and the architecture. Some folks thought it's about culture, it's about funding, it's about how we get work done on this campus and make decisions. And I think the answer is yes to all of those things. It's all of those things, but when we were talking about them, they were all kind of, the threads were all getting crossed. And we found that this metaphor of the theater or the stage helped us kind of start to disentangle this and think about how we could slice off chunks of this and start focusing on improvements. So the front stage is the part where most of us on a daily basis may be interacting with technology or interoperability. We're logging in, we're trying to get a service set up, we're developing an application. The backstage is where all the stuff that's under the hood, sort of the data, the systems, the processes, and other things are happening behind the scenes, or excuse me, in the backstage. And then finally, the behind the scenes are kind of where you'd expect kind of direction to happen, where planning and budgeting is happening. So we're going to actually start from behind the scenes and work our way sort of towards the front stage today. So feedback is really important as we go along. We've had a little bit of a last minute change here. So based on the paper form here, we're trying a couple of new things here today, and some of them worked and some of them didn't work out. So but the first way that we'd like to give feedback if you're remote and not here in the room today is via the YouTube stream. There's a link to that up there, and I believe Charlie sent that out to a few moments ago to many of you. We're happy to kind of repeat this URL if you'd like to stream it as well. But for the folks that are in the room, there are index cards at the back. If you didn't grab any, please go ahead and grab some, and that can be a way that you can pass those up to a member of the team, and we'll kind of ask questions that way. Some folks may not feel comfortable with asking something out loud, or maybe just want to kind of write it out, and maybe we won't have time to answer all the questions today, but we want to capture them. finally, oh, Pat, did you have something else?
Who's on the team?
Who's on the team? So I think you can kind of see we're sort of spread out throughout the room. I don't know if folks want to raise their hands in the room, and you can see that there's a person near you, perhaps, that has been working on the team. So if you've got questions or an index card to share with them, please do so. For the folks that can't see the team, I'm sorry, they are here. So finally, there's a last item down here, which is an email list. If you aren't able to, or you need more time to kind of think about questions or feedback, you can use that list afterwards, and hopefully we'll send that around if we haven't already. So, any questions before we proceed about feedback? Okay, seeing none. We're going to transition. We're going to segue to talking about what does interoperability look like behind the scenes. You mind segueing for me? Thank you. So, believe it or not, the behind the scenes stuff, the policies, the standards, the funding, the culture and politics of our campus. These are the things when we went out and interviewed people and when we kind of gathered ideas from the team and via survey, this is the stuff that came up the most. It wasn't the technical stuff. It wasn't always the user experience stuff. It was often that this place is really hard. It's hard for us to do things differently. It's hard for us to change. Sometimes it's hard for us to work together. So we have some ideas about ways of combating that and kind of working through that. And one of those is by creating a service standard. We'll share a little bit more about that in a moment, but we also wanted to talk about some ideas that we have around governance, around a service model, and around change management for this effort. So, the service standard. I'm trying to just pause here for a moment. So, part of the reason why we think a service standard is so important is because if we don't have a standard or we don't have clear ways of working together across the group, we're going to run around with our heads cut off like headless chickens, and we're going to deliver. We're going to solution, 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 and at the end of the day, we're all bumping up against each other, we're running around, and we haven't necessarily satisfied or solved any of the problems that are most important for folks in our campus. So, I think many of us have been on the receiving end of this, of what services feel like when they've been designed this way, and we've also maybe been participated in creating services that we know don't necessarily work very well for folks, but we feel kind of stuck and unable to move through that. So, service standard. So we have a hypothesis, which is that we can only overcome this sort of headless chicken problem if we work toward a common goal and we work together across campus. I want to talk a little bit about what that might look like and get your feedback on it. So what could a service standard do for us here on campus? You may be wondering why there is a picture of a muffin and some little round things up here. This is, one of the colleagues of the team especially was very troubled by this illustration. Seems a little silly, but the point of this is that it's really tough to make a blueberry muffin when you are trying to put the blueberries in after the muffin has been baked. And in many ways, we do this a lot on our campus. We try to kind of smoosh the security blueberries into the muffin after it's been baked. We try to smoosh in accessibility blueberries. We're trying to kind of do things out of sequence and out of sync. And not surprisingly, it's messy and it doesn't work super well. So we think that a service standard, a unified service standard, could help us figure out how to work together to keep quality high, keep our services meeting the needs of campus, to speed up implementation so that it doesn't take so long to make decisions about which tools we should use or shouldn't use and how to get them integrated into our systems. We hope we can embed accessibility, security, and other things that are really important to be there throughout the entire process, and ultimately ensure things like interoperability so that our systems can work together and talk to each other. Enabling collaboration is another important piece of this as well. How do we work together as a campus when we are so distributed? And finally, having a vision to work towards that we share is something that I think folks I hope will feel excited about and feel like it helps to align our many different efforts in one direction. So what does a service standard look like? Service standards have, or I should just say standards in general, have a really long history, but they really kind of hit their stride coming out of the Industrial Revolution, when things move from being craft and one-off and bespoke kind of solutions to, hey, we need to make the same teapot over and over and over again. And different people are making that teapot, and they're making different pieces of that teapot. So we need standards that help keep the focus on, not just on creating the spout or the top of the teapot, but how do we create a teapot together? So a service standard is outcome focused. At the end of this, we need a result. It's comprehensive, and this is one area that I think we've struggled with a bit on campus and looking at our different standards and policies, is that they're spread out all over the place. We have security standards, we have accessibility standards, we have standards for service design, we have standards kind of spread out all over the place. It's really hard though to figure out, like, how do those things work together and fit together? It's hard to find them even. So a service standard would be could be a way for us to stitch those different disparate efforts together. A service standard is understandable. Any of us can read the standard and understand what it means. It's not highly technical, at least not at the highest level. It's something that feels relatable. It's also repeatable. We can use this standard again and again to confront and solve different problems. And finally, it's supported. It's supported through policy, through governance, and we also provide guidance and tools and patterns and code to help ensure that we're staying the course with our standards. So we're not alone here. We're not the first folks to say that we would benefit from having a service standard. Folks have come before us here. This is the US Digital Service. This is sort of the US IT sort of behemoth that's working to improve experiences in government in the United States. This is their digital service playbook. And this is the way that they kind of get many different teams spread out across the country and even in some cases across the world to figure out how to work together towards common goals. So this is the US Digital Service example. Another example is from the UK government. They have a very comprehensive digital service standard as well that has high-level principles that folks follow and drills down into more detailed information around different aspects and areas of the standard. So we can't do this without you. So this is where the audience participation comes in. So we want to know and get your thoughts on what a service standard might look like. We've had some ideas over the course of the past few weeks about what this might look like for campus, but we want to get your feedback and insights into this as well. I don't know if many of you brought a phone today, or if you did or didn't, that's fine, but you can go to this URL here. This is goo.gl/D6H7WS, or via a note card. We want you to just take a couple of minutes to think about some of these questions that we've been thinking about, and we want your input and feedback on. The questions that we'd like you to consider is, what does a good IT service look like? What does it look like when it's working well? For end users, for technical users, for administrative users on campus, what does it look like when it's working well? And maybe conversely, what does it look like when it's not working so well? The second question that we're curious about is, what should we standardize? And maybe what should we not standardize? We can't standardize everything because we're not a standard campus. We don't have the same problems. We have different and unique challenges in some cases. And how can we make sure that collectively we stick to and stay the course and follow our standard together? So I want to give folks just a few minutes to think on this, and then, yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Can you put a little scope around the definition of the word service standard as opposed to like a UX standard? Or
Yeah.
how would you define the service standard?
How would I define the service standard is the question for folks that maybe couldn't hear it. So I think that this is sort of thinking more broadly about what does an IT service look like overall. Both the user experience of it, the technical back end of it, how it helps to support the work campus. I don't think that it's just a UX standard. It could include things like security, like accessibility, like the importance of using open standards, for example. These are many of the things that are covered in some of our peers' versions of this digital standard. So I don't know if that answers your question. This isn't just a user experience standard. It's sort of thinking more broadly about a service in general, IT services. When they work well, what does that look like? What would that look like here on our campus? Does that help? I don't know if it does. Maybe other folks can fill me out too if they feel like they've got something else to add from the team.
It helped me.
Okay, great. Thanks, Doug. So we're going to just maybe just a few minutes, and if folks have any other questions or would like to share some things, but we're also going to share some ideas that we gathered from interviews. So these are some thought starters I'm going to ask you to advance. Pat. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I don't know for I try to go to the URL and I get access to any information.
Bummer.
So,
Oh, all right.
I don't know if
Maybe Charlie can help us with that while he's here. So I did open up access to it. I'm not sure if it's been, we've tried a number of different ways of getting feedback. Could you actually go back one more? Pat, you skipped one, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so some thought starters here. Some of these things might seem apparent, but when we went out and talked with folks on campus, we did a survey. These are some of the things that we've heard about folks' perceptions around interoperability, but also more broadly about IT services on campus. The first is that people want things to work. This is not necessarily a surprising thing, but it came up a lot. People felt like parts of it worked, right? Like you could get something done here and you could get something done here, but the end-to-end where you were saying, like, this is the goal that I want to get to, people didn't feel like that was stitched together and they were helped along throughout the process. So people want things to work. Security and accessibility is another point that came up a lot. And there's a sense that these are things that contribute to quality and they're often afterthoughts. So, or they feel like they're slowing things down when we're introducing them too late in the process. Technical and data standardization came up a lot as well. We don't have shared standards in many cases. We don't have shared ways of defining data. In some cases we do, in other cases we don't. There's a sense from campus that we need to respond to change. Our environment, our world is changing, and the way that we deliver services isn't necessarily. Thank you, Charlie. You should be able to get there now if you would like to. So this notion of being able to evolve and to fail fast is something that came up as well. And kind of related to it is how do we get better over time and balance the greater good with local and immediate needs. So these are some questions that we were considering and certainly came up in the interviews and the surveys that we sent out to folks. So does anyone have any thoughts about what does a good IT service look like that you'd be willing to share? Yeah.
I think one item that's missing here is just cost to the end user, to whoever's consuming whatever services that you're providing. If you're a student, either free or very minimal cost would be obviously preferred. But even interdepartmentally or any between any two entities on campus, it needs to be something that's affordable and attainable, or what's the point?
Yeah, that makes sense. And that the cost piece came up quite a bit as a possible, not as a possible, but as a barrier in our current state and something that we would want to do differently in the future. So I don't know if other folks have thoughts on the funding model or anything related to that or other aspects of what they feel like they'd like to share about an IT service. Yeah.
I think people want them to work the way they expect them to work.
Okay.
So, meet their expectations of how things work or how they're labeled, how they're branded, where to find them. I also want them to work right now. If it doesn't work right now, they're going to move on to something else.
Okay, that's really helpful. Anyone else? How do you know when a service isn't working? An IT service, whether it's one that you deliver or one that you are a consumer of. Yeah.
For us in the schools and colleges, it's the leadership and or faculty and instructors ask us to create something different or adjunct or gap fit or whatever it is.
Something different that's outside of the standard offerings? Okay.
There's no such thing as standard. You just ask us for something and it isn't what we already offer.
Okay.
I was struck by the what should we standardize and what should we not. And I was inclined to say everything and everything on both of them.
Okay.
Using the network as an example, for large portions of the network should all be standardized. We all should be doing very much the same things. Yet another example has been used as like ad hoc robotic networks, so that Arduinos and things can communicate point to point. That should be probably recreated all across campus if it isn't sustainable. If it's real standardized thing, great, but parts of it is standardized, parts of it is not standardized. Although I consider the network one service, to be standardized and not standardized.
Okay.
So actually, to follow on that one, I agree that some things need to be standardized and not standardized, but also the special cases have to become regular cases and built into the model. Even if it's just built in that this is what we expect for all these cases, but we also support ad hoc, we also support, so like build in that these special cases is at least understood as part of the reality.
Okay. Brian?
Back to your question, were you asking how do I tell if something's broken, or how do I tell if I'm just confused and not sure how to advance, or both?
Well, I mean, I guess perhaps the second is a symptom of the first. Could be anyway, that that I'm confused and don't know how to advance. May not be. Is that on the end user, or is that the service isn't helping
for
folks through?
example, and you can pick almost any example. A lot of times, you kind of run into a wall, but you don't know that the wall is there. In other words, there isn't a message that says this is broken. It is not working. Go to this alternative, or simply wait. At other times, you kind of hunt and peck. You're not really sure. Is it me? Am I not understanding how this works? So I guess my point is that you should help people try to discern the difference and find a way forward.
To help them reach their goal.
Right.
Yeah. Andrew, did you have something?
Yeah, to the question of what characterizes a good service. I think a good service is characterized by its psychological effect on people. That there's a new book out. It doesn't have to be crazy at work. Recommended, good book. Which made me think about this. How does it feel to be a person tasked with delivering this service? And if that does not feel stressful, if that feels calm, and I got this, and this is a solvable problem, we're good here, that's fantastic. That's a good service. If that feels terrible, if that feels scary, if that feels stressful, if that feels like you're going to work 12-hour days, that is a problematic service. And then likewise on the user side of it, that if it feels like I can find this service, I understand the service, I can solve my problem, that's good, that's a good service. If I'm stressed out the whole time I'm using the service, that's a bad service. It seems like a decent heuristic for looking at a service and getting a feel for, are we good here?
Yeah, Rob?
From a streaming perspective, it's the questions aren't heard on the other end, so.
Okay, thank you for the reminder. I really appreciate that. So we had a couple of questions and pieces of feedback around how the service, how it feels to interact with the service, both as someone who is tasked with supporting the service and as an end user of the service. Was some pieces of feedback? Yes.
Yeah, well, I was just noticing the get better over time, and I think part of the thing, just to kind of riff off what he said, is like, yeah, I think the service is what solves people's problems. It makes solves the problem that they're trying to solve, and that problem can change over time. So, like designing it for this interoperability, so that you can change what it's trying to solve over time, because we do. I mean, we have a lot of people, and you don't know like how people are going to use the service.
Yeah.
When you're designing it, that was one problem with the comprehensive thing at the beginning, is that you just might not be able to do that at the beginning. You just might not have that information. So designing for change, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great. So there's some feedback from the importance of designing for change, because so many of the circumstances, whether it's technology or user expectations or different ways that people want to do something, that's going to evolve over time, and whatever we do should try to take that into consideration as much as possible so we don't get sort of locked in. That's kind of what I was gathering from.
Yeah.
Great. So this is really kind of the beginning of a conversation about what might kind of a more unified standard look like for campus. And I think part of this is kind of trying to take the temperature to say, does this feel like it's something that would be useful and valuable to have? Do we feel like we already have this, or does this feel like something that's new and different from what we have? That's a big question, but anyone want to take a crack? Yeah.
I think it's different.
It's different?
Yes.
Not sure if it could be useful or not useful yet.
Oh, I think it could be useful, but actually, I think another. I was thinking about this.
Folks on the stream are hearing.
Okay, thanks.
I think it's hard for us to. I think it's hard for us to answer this in the abstract.
Yep.
Okay, I think it's hard for us to answer this in the abstract, but I think the questions you're asking are the better questions. A service should answer those questions. A service standard should have a way of telling whether it's successful or not. How a service standard should include the measurements of success, measurements of usage, etc. It would also be easier to look at some existing service standards and say what's missing, as opposed to talking abstract.
Okay. Thank you. I think we're going to transition to the next segment, but I did want to give a little bit of an update. I really appreciate this feedback, and I hope that additional feedback will come into those documents. Kind of our next steps, what we're thinking about is doing some additional research. I don't know if you can, there we go. Doing some additional research with peer and industry examples and seeing what we can kind of learn from those examples and use those as maybe some scaffolding for developing a standard for campus. And I think a big part of that is further developing some of the ideas that you've been sharing here today and gathering more of those ideas and working together, hopefully, to develop a standard that we feel like we can all get behind and find useful and helps to shape and improve the quality of IT services here on campus.